In this video, I'm going to be making one of these battery boxes. This is used to hold a battery in an e-bike. It goes in the pannier. I'll show a picture of that. The battery takes up the bottom half, and then in the top half I put my cargo. It's made out of 60-61 aluminum, 1/4 inch bar, and 120 wall angle. I made this battery box out of E4043 stick electrodes, and those were interesting to work with. I prefer to TIG weld after experiencing those. This box here I made out of rivets before I knew how to weld, and these battery boxes are really tough. I've been hit by a car and it didn't even dent it. So I'll show a picture of what it looks like on the bike. When I use these battery boxes, I hide them inside this pannier. And that's why it's custom made, because it's custom made to be as large as possible while still fitting in this pannier. This e-bike has a lot of miles on it. You can see I've gone down a couple of times. And so the battery is in there and there's room for cargo. Here's a view of the inside. You can see the aluminum battery box tightly fitted in there, and the battery in the bottom. There's enough room to stuff a large winter jacket in there, or like a small backpack full of stuff. So I cut these and fit them up about 6 weeks ago, so I'm going to have to re-prep them. Going to file off the aluminum oxide and clean them with acetone, and then TIG weld the base using 4043 filler material. So I used a 4.5 inch angle grinder to grind the seams where I was going to weld, and then I did a final fit up, and the fit up is just okay. Now I'm going to clean it with acetone and weld it. So now it's all set up to tack. I cleaned it with acetone and I clamped all 4 sides to the bench, and it's square at each corner. Here's the settings that I'm going to use. This is a Miller 210DX, and it happens to have a water cooler. The polarity is AC because I'm welding on aluminum. I'm going to use a high frequency arc start. This remote pertains to whether you're using the foot pedal or a robot. I'm using a foot pedal. I'm not going to use pulse today, so I'll make sure that the pulse is off. So there, the pulse is off. This is not valid because that's if you're using the remote 2T hold. That's why that says not valid. The pre-flow is 0.8 seconds. The post-flow is 8 seconds. My current is 125 amps because this is 120 wall material. My AC balance, I'm going to start with 70% balance. I might adjust that later. I'm using 115 hertz for the frequency because I couldn't decide between 110 and 120. I'm using pure argon, and I have it set to 15 CFH. I'm using 3/32 inch 2% lanthanated tungsten, sharpened to a 30-degree angle, and I did not blunt the tip. I'm using a number 6 standard cup, and of course a 3/32 standard collet. Here are the 4 tacks that I did. They were cracking, so I turned up the current to 140 amps. Now that it's tack welded, I took off a lot of those clamps that were getting in my way. So I'm going to finish welding on this side, and then I'll see how I did with penetration on the other side. Here's the penetration that I got on the other side. Did not penetrate through all the way, so I'm going to weld up that side. I'm going to put that channel under there. That channel is made of steel, and the reason I'm putting it under there is that so the bottom doesn't fall out of the aluminum. You know how when you're welding aluminum and the whole thing just drops out from you? If I put the steel down there, that won't happen.
So the way that I clamped it made it warp a little when I was welding it. So now I'm going to clamp it flat down on the bench and weld it again so that it'll warp down to where it's flat. So that worked. Now I can see that I can wash the welds on this side because they didn't penetrate all the way. So even with that extremely aggressive weld washing, I still haven't managed to have full penetration on the other side. This is my setup to fix the hole that I burned. So now I've done my hole repair and I'm getting back to the task at hand, which is to make sure I had full penetration on all those seams. So I've clamped it flat to the table. And I did shove some steel in there so that if it's going to have the bottom fall out of it, it won't have far to go. Now I see I missed a little part there. So I've got to add a little more material. And that's what that looks like. So now I'm welding the back side of this seam. I made sure to clamp it down flat so it'll stay flat. And I think I've got this clamp in my way a little bit. That was in the area where I had been fixing that hole. So that's what that looks like. I'm sure it'll be fine when it's ground down flat. So this is the last seam that I have to weld the back side of. I'm going to start with an autogenous weld, a fusion weld. But I'm going to have the filler material in my hand in case. And like I did before, I put steel under the joint so the bottom won't fall out. So that's what that looks like. So I'm going to be welding that inside corner, and I've put a steel fence around it so that if the aluminum wants to drop out, it has nowhere to go. So here I am doing that inside corner. This clamps in my way a little bit. I'm not sure how well I'll be able to get in there. I can't get in there like that. This clamps in the way too much. Well, I'm sure it's a good thing I had that steel back there to protect it. When I turn it over, I'll be able to see how much penetration I got. I burned off a tip of this side right here, so I'll just fix that now. So let's see what we got here on the other side. I'm sure it's a good thing I have those steel fences there. It's almost would be a good thing if the bottom dropped out. Let the steel in back create the shape. This is what the back looks like. It looks fine. When I grind that down, it'll look perfect. And let's see how much it penetrated on the back side of that seam. Note that this seam that I'm welding is hidden in the bottom of it's under a battery inside a pannier. So nobody's going to see it, but I do need it to be strong. Here's what the back side looks like. It's a very good thing that that steel fence was there. You could see it was completely melted, and even with all that, it did not penetrate that back. But now that I have all that material there, when I do this outside corner, I don't think it'll burn through because there's so much material there. I can't imagine it burning through, so I'm going to do that now, and I'll clean it up with a steel brush and some acetone. There's the seam I'm going to be welding now. It has a lot of material on the back side of it, so there's not too much danger of burning through. So now I cleaned that up really well with a brush and acetone, and I'm using this other box for a brace. This is what it looks like. I'm sure it'll look great when it's ground down. So this is that same thing I did before. It's an inside corner. And I have steel fences here so that the aluminum doesn't drop out, wash away. And I'm going to shove this in when I get my puddle. So that's what that looks like. It's just trying to penetrate into the seam. We'll see if it penetrated out the back side. This is what the back side of it looks like. It's a good thing I had that steel there, but it did not penetrate through to the seam for full penetration of the seam. Here's what the other side looks like. Like I say, it's a really good thing that I had that steel fence back there, because you could see it was molten. It's got a little crater there. Here's the seam I'm welding. I cleaned it up with a wire brush and acetone. So that's a good weld for me, because I'm not a good TIG welder, particularly with aluminum. So I got penetration, and when I grind it all down, it'll look beautiful. So this is awful TIG welding, but it did penetrate, at least on this side. So we'll see what the other side looks like. This is what the other side looks like before I've cleaned it up with a wire brush and acetone. I can't believe with all that heat that I used that it didn't penetrate all the way through. I guess I used too much filler material. So that's what it looks like. That's good for me. I'm not trying to make it look pretty, I'm just trying to make it to where it penetrates both sides of the seam 100%. That was the worst ever. I'm just going to show it and let it speak for itself. I might have spent 6 hours of my whole life TIG welding aluminum, and apparently you need to do a lot more than that to be good. So this is the worst you will ever see. Just an absolute horror show. Note the one side is completely gone, which will be easy to fix with a steel fence there. You see over here, it got so hot it started undercutting in from the angle. So I'm going to take advantage of that steel fence there and then fill that other side. So I've never seen anything so terrible in my life, welding or otherwise. So we'll see what the other side looks like. Well, this side doesn't look so bad. And incredibly, in all of that, I did not get penetration on the back side. That is just incredibly frustrating. That would never happen with steel. So here's what it looks like on the back side. This is the side that had the big hole that I just laid it up against the steel and filled it with filler material. So when this is all ground down, it'll be fine, but you gotta worry about the properties of the material with that heat affected zone. And this is the other side of that complete disaster of melting aluminum. I could grind that down now and it would be fine. So this is what I'm fixing now. I'm going to try to get back to basics and just pretend that's a seam and fill it using the proper techniques. So that's what that area looks like after I fixed it. So here's my last seam of the day. Looks like it's a pretty easy one. After all that's gone wrong today, I'm just going to try to get back to basics and just follow the proper techniques and make a stack of dimes across there. So that was good for me. So I like that. I made a kind of a cold stack of dimes and then I washed it twice. So now I'm going to grind it and I'm sure that it's going to look great. So here is this base that I TIG welded after I cleaned it up with a grinder. All that horrific TIG welding and it cleaned up pretty nice. Here's what it looks like from the inside. I could clean that up with the mill, but I want to leave the extra material there just so it'll be all the more sturdy. The weight doesn't matter because this is for a e-bike and the e-bike has a huge motor. And that is not seen at all. So that's the end of part one, TIG welding the base.